Tuesday was primary day in New York, where voters across the state cast their ballot for who they want to represent their respective parties in the upcoming general election. There were races for congressional seats, the state legislature, and a slew of down-ballot races, depending on voters' districts. Today, we'll be focusing largely on congressional primaries. As you may recall, back in 2022, Democrats in New York lost 4 House seats, which ultimately helped Republicans gain control of the House of Representatives. Since then, both parties have had their sights set on trying to get control of the chamber this year, and they see New York as the path forward. To help us unpack the competitive races in this year's congressional primaries, we're joined in studio by Austin Jefferson of City and State. Thank you so much for joining us today, Austin.
Pleasure to be here.
Now, naturally, I wanted to start with Congressional District 16 between incumbent Representative Jamal Bowman and George Latimer. We know this was a very, very competitive race. All eyes were on this race. There was so much money spent on this race. So I just wanted to understand, can you give us the lay of the land of why this particular primary was so competitive?
It was sort of competitive for a few reasons. I mean, you have George Latimer, who has insane name recognition after being in politics in Westchester for about 30 years. And you have Jamal Bowman, who is a national progressive figure who, I mean, from New York City to San Francisco, people know who that person is. But I think the reason the race played out the way that it did had a lot to do with October 7th. I think that galvanized so many voters on both sides and made this a national conversation in what was really a local sort of referendum on what kind of representation they want in Congress. And, you know, we saw that play out on Tuesday with a pretty decisive victory for Latimer.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting how a national issue can impact such a local race. And this is a district that we know is very diverse, spanning parts of the Bronx in New York City and Westchester County. So, you know, in terms of the debate between the two candidates, how did you see that impacting the way that it turned out ultimately?
I think what ended up happening was, you know, we did see Latimer say some interesting things about race during most of those debates, but the issue was that what Bowman had to say in response generally wasn't as compelling. He couldn't give a sales pitch, it seemed, beyond George Latimer is bad. And I think that came back to bite him because voters, all they had was sound bites of him being upset with George Latimer and the things he was doing and saying.
Right. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we know that this is the most expensive primary or House primary in history, according to Ad Impact. It was about $25 million in ad spending. So how did you see that impacting the way that George Latimer performed in the end?
I think that it definitely had an effect as far as visibility goes, but I mean, most residents in that district already knew the lay of the land. Yeah. I don't think anyone decided who they were voting for in June. But I mean, there were stories of people getting like 19 mailers from George Latimer in a week, like they can't even get their mail anymore. Mm-hmm. So as far as just the level of attention paid to each candidate in the race, it definitely showed up in terms of who was able to make their message the loudest and most available.
Absolutely. And I wanted to discuss Congressional District 1. This is a district represented by Representative Nick LaLota, and the Democratic primary was between Nancy Goroff and John Avlon. And, you know, we know John Avlon was able to best Nancy Goroff, but I think the big question here was who was better suited to take on Nick LaLota come November. So now that John Avlon has secured that victory against Nancy Goroff, how do you see him stacking up against Nick LaLota come November?
I think like much of Long Island, it won't really be easy to oust a Republican, but I think being a moderate candidate will definitely serve him well come November. I think the issue is, which is really the same issue for all Democrats in New York, is what issue will be the one that will sort of split inside of voters from Republican-leaning in districts where, you know, they happily voted for Republicans in 2022 to the Democrat side. Because, I mean, I think, at least so far, the idea is to go after reproductive rights, but it's yet to be seen if that will work again.
Right. And you mentioned reproductive rights. Were there any other big issues in this race?
I mean, I think like a lot of races, just, affordability, to a much lesser extent, well, actually not a lesser extent, but the migrant crisis,
Right,
just general, I guess, public safety for people.
Yeah. And looking at Congressional District 24, we know that this is represented by Representative Claudia Tenney, and she went against Mario Fratto. This is a rematch between the two candidates. And I think the big question here was about positioning, right? Mario Fratto seemed to really hammer in this idea that Tenney wasn't conservative enough, although she was backed by former President Donald Trump. So how did you think that positioning ultimately helped or hindered Claudia Tenney in this race?
Well, I mean, I think it's really interesting that in New York you can have a sort of an intra-MAGA fight among Republicans. I think ultimately having Trump support, if you're a Republican, that's what you want to happen. And that bear down the results when she beat Fratto. But I think the strategy of running to the right of her, I'm not sure if that was the most well thought out, especially in New York. But I think going forward for candidates like Fratto and Tenney, I think so long as Donald Trump is the sort of standard bearer for the Republican Party, it's really just about having his support, or at least the support of people who believe in his ideas.
Were there any other surprises or any other races that you were looking out for on primary night?
I think it was interesting what happened in central New York between John Mannion and Sarah Lee Hood, because that was a case where each candidate, it was hard to tell them apart on policy for the most part. But it just came down to, I think, like the margins. Mannion had won tough elections in the district before. It's very, very flippable after redistricting. The incumbent, Brandon Williams, is definitely up for a tough fight in the lead up to November's general. And I think him having the support of the teachers union, it really did make a big difference.
And you've reported a lot on the proxy fights in terms of the primary races, specifically around congressional seats. So can you tell us about some of the big primary or proxy fights for the primary races? And is it too early to declare an early winner in those fights?
I think it's still a little too early, because I think in some of these cases, you want to see the long-term effects of them. But I think in the case of Hakeem Jeffries and, I guess, Brooklyn socialists, I think there's a real sense that Hakeem is at least in a stabler position than he might have been had certain results at the state level gone differently. As far as, say in Westchester, where you had Bernie Sanders backing Bowman and Hillary Clinton backing George Latimer. I mean, that one, I think Bernie Sanders, for lack of a better word, lost. I think you're one of the largest voices in progressive politics, at least in the House, couldn't beat off his challenger. And I think the fact that a Democratic establishment figure such as Hillary Clinton having her candidate win, I think that was a large message about the sort of strength of each of their messages.
And why do you think it was so important for these powerful figures to sort of participate in these primaries? Like, what was at stake for them?
I mean, I think for them, it's both the idea that adding your voice to a fight like these races can really make a difference. But I think partly it's that, they're concerned. They want to at least get involved if they can, in some cases settle scores. But just feel as though they're doing everything they can to make sure that their version of democratic politics has the best chance of going forward.
And we know back in 2022, New York was sort of influential in handing over control of the House of Representatives to Republicans, losing about 4 House seats. So how do Democrats look in terms of this election cycle? How are they positioned? Are they in a good position? How would you kind of describe where things stand currently?
I mean, I think they're I think they're in the tough position of having to undo mistakes from 2022. I think Long Island, that along with the Hudson Valley, is going to be a big test of, do they understand that sort of hyper-progressive policies from New York City, they don't necessarily play as well with suburban voters. And it's not as if the suburbs are not ready for change or modern democratic policies. But they have concerns, and a lot of them, they live in the New York media market, so they're seeing things happening in New York City, and they're worried that's coming to their smaller communities. So I think understanding that and sort of approaching these races as, all right, how do we craft a message for Orange County or Nassau County, as opposed to how do we craft it for Democrats in New York, which to a lot within the party, it doesn't extend beyond New York City.
Is it safe to say that Democrats have learned from their mistakes of the past?
I think that's yet to be seen. I think many of them hope they have, but I think until we're counting votes in November, it's hard to say.
Yeah, well, certainly a lot to look forward to. Unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here for today, but thank you so much for joining us today, Austin.
Thanks for having me.
And we were speaking with Austin Jefferson of City and State, New York. And the winners of the primaries will go on to face each other in the November election. In addition to the competitive primary races for congressional seats in New York, we'll also be diving into the races for the state legislature right here on the show in the coming weeks.